On the morning of December 1st, 1948, the seawall at Somerton Beach held a quiet, unsettling secret. A man lay slumped against the concrete, his legs crossed, a half-smoked cigarette resting on his collar. He carried no wallet, no identification, and bore no signs of violence. To the casual observer, he was just a man sleeping off the night before. To the detectives who arrived, he was a blank slate, the beginning of an obsession that would haunt Australia for more than 70 years. The body was transported to the morgue, where the absence of identity deepened into something deliberate. Every manufacturer tag, every laundry mark had been meticulously snipped from his clothing. His shoes were polished, his hands uncalloused, suggesting a man of means, yet his dental records matched no one. The authorities fingerprinted him, circulated his photograph across the British Empire, and waited for a name that never came. He was a ghost, wearing a tailored suit. The autopsy only thickened the fog. The pathologist found severe congestion in the brain and stomach, an enlarged spleen, and blood pooling unnaturally in the liver. It was the biological signature of a lethal poison, yet toxicological screens returned completely clean. No barbiturates, no cyanide, no known alkaloids. Whether he was murdered with an untraceable toxin or chose to end his own life, the mechanism of death vanished into his bloodstream without a trace. Months dragged on, and the investigation stalled until a detective decided to re-examine the dead man's trousers. Deep within the fob pocket, hidden by a meticulous hand-stitched repair, they found it, a tiny, tightly rolled piece of paper concealed in a secret coat pocket lining that had been completely overlooked. This was the red thread, the singular anomaly that would drag the case out of a local precinct and into the realm of international intrigue. Unfurled with tweezers, the scrap revealed two printed words, Tamam Shud. It was a Persian phrase translating directly to "it is finished" or "ended." Scholars quickly identified the font and paper as belonging to a very specific edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a 12th century collection of fatalistic poetry. The Somerton Man had carried a literal declaration of finality hidden in his clothes, transforming a John Doe into a walking cipher. A nationwide appeal for the exact copy of the book yielded a bizarre breakthrough. A local man came forward with a rare edition of the Rubaiyat, found tossed into the back seat of his unlocked car near the beach just days before the body was discovered. The final page was torn out. The paper matched the Tamam Shud scrap perfectly, but the back cover held something far more dangerous. A faint, handwritten sequence of letters resembling an encrypted code, and an unlisted telephone number. That phone number belonged to Jessica Thompson, a nurse living just a short walk from where the body was found. When detectives arrived at her door, she was evasive, visibly terrified when shown a plaster bust of the dead man, yet she steadfastly denied knowing him. Her proximity to the scene, her background, and the encrypted letters in the book ignited a firestorm of speculation. The Somerton Man was no longer a tragic suicide. He was a Soviet spy, a victim of Cold War espionage. Decades bled into one another, and the grave in Adelaide slowly weathered away under the harsh Australian sun. The mystery of Somerton Beach became a sprawling tapestry of conspiracy theories, black market smuggling rings, and secret lovers. Generations of amateur sleuths and seasoned investigators tried to crack the code, trying to force the chaotic letters into a coherent military cipher. The truth remained buried beneath layers of romanticized fiction, waiting for technology to catch up with the evidence. The 21st century brought a revolution in forensic science, shifting the battlefield from physical clues to the microscopic architecture of human cells. In 2021, the South Australian police authorized the exhumation of the unknown man. The wooden coffin had rotted, the remains heavily degraded by time and embalming fluids. The answers were no longer in the secret coat pocket or the torn book, but hidden deep within the fragmented strands of his surviving bone and hair. Extracting viable genetic material from a body heavily treated with formaldehyde is a grueling, near impossible task. The chemical preservatives cross-link the DNA, shattering it into useless microscopic shards. Investigators turned to hairs that had been trapped in the plaster death mask cast in 1949. Using advanced techniques designed for ancient DNA recovery, scientists managed to isolate and sequence a partial genetic profile, a fragile bridge connecting the past to the present. This fragile sequence was handed over to the pioneers of forensic genealogy. They uploaded the data into vast, open-source genetic databases, searching for distant cousins, tracing chromosomal segments back through time. It was a painstaking process of triangulation, building massive family trees from thousands of public records, census data, and birth certificates. They were looking for a missing branch, a man who vanished without a trace in the late 1940s. The genetic net slowly tightened around a specific family lineage originating in Victoria. The sprawling tree was pruned branch by branch, eliminating relatives who had documented deaths or known whereabouts after 1948. The ancestral lines converged on a single household, isolating one specific individual whose timeline abruptly stopped. After 74 years of silence, the static cleared, and the ghost of Somerton Beach finally had a name. His name was Carl Webb. He was not a highly trained Soviet operative, nor an international smuggler dealing in state secrets. He was a 43-year-old electrical engineer and instrument maker from Melbourne. This identification shattered the grand cinematic illusions that had surrounded the case for 3/4 of a century. The truth was far more grounded, rooted in the quiet, desperate reality of a man whose life was unraveling. The psychological profile of Carl Webb painted a picture of a brilliant but deeply troubled individual. He was known to have a fascination with poetry, a sharp intellect, and a volatile, violent temper. By late 1948, his marriage had collapsed, and his wife had fled to South Australia to escape him. The international spy thriller dissolved into a stark, domestic tragedy, shifting the entire context of his final journey. With Webb's identity established, the most baffling pieces of evidence suddenly made sense. The impenetrable code scrawled in the back of the rubaiyat was re-examined through the lens of his actual life. It was not a military cipher carrying nuclear secrets. Webb was an avid follower of horse racing, and the erratic string of letters perfectly matched the shorthand used by punters to track horse names and betting odds. Even the most iconic clue, the hidden fob pocket containing the Tamam Shud scrap, was stripped of its espionage mystique. As an instrument maker, Webb was skilled with his hands, accustomed to precise, meticulous work. The secret coat pocket was likely his own handiwork, a practical, invisible repair made by a man living alone, carrying the weight of his own impending finality. We can now trace the final, desperate movements of Carl Webb. He boarded a train from Melbourne to Adelaide, likely attempting to track down his estranged wife. When he realized she was gone, or perhaps after a final, unseen rejection, the heavy fatalism of the poetry he carried took hold. He was a man out of options, out of hope, walking alone toward the edge of the continent. The precise nature of the poison that stopped his heart remains unconfirmed, but the intent is no longer a mystery. He walked down to the sand of Somerton Beach under the cover of darkness. He tore the final words from the page, slipped the declaration into his meticulously stitched pocket, and sat against the cold concrete of the seawall to wait for the end. The case of the Somerton Man captivated the world because human nature abhors a vacuum. We filled the empty spaces of Carl Webb's life with our own anxieties, projecting Cold War paranoia onto a man who had simply reached the end of his rope. We demanded a grand conspiracy, but the evidence, once finally understood, pointed only to profound isolation. How the Somerton Man mystery was finally solved is a testament to the relentless march of forensic science. The red thread was never a line connecting international syndicates. It was a fragile sequence of DNA leading back to a broken engineer from Melbourne. The mystery is over. The case is cracked. For Carl Webb, just as the scrap of paper promised, it is finished.